Welcome to the Successful Life Podcast. I'm your host, Corey Berrier, and I'm here with my man, Justin Judd. What's up, brother?
What's up, Corey?
Today's going to be a bit different show. I had a gentleman ask me if I'd ever told my story here on my own show, and the answer is I haven't really ever gone into my full story. And Justin and I have been friends for quite some time now and shared very similar stories. And so I've asked Justin to come on today and just get into my story and some of the things that we've both kind of gone through. And so it's going to be a bit of a different format today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, man. That meant a lot that you reached out to me in regards to that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, dude, you're, you're a special person to me, brother. And I really appreciate you.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Shout out to Corey. A lot of people talk the talk, but don't walk the walk. But I think I've received a gratitude list for the last, I don't know, 6 months, maybe more than that, every single day. And I don't think I've ever responded to it. And I still get it every single morning. That's pretty awesome, dude.
I
Where did you
found
learn about, like, where did that come from?
That's a great question. And I gotta give my girlfriend credit for this because she started sending me her gratitude list, and as you've seen some of mine, they're long, and hers were really long. And I thought, who really wants to read all this shit?
Yeah, and who's like gonna consistently do that every
Right.
single day? Because
And
I get it every day from you.
yeah, so then I started sending it back to her, and then it just as I would meet people and think about people that were important in my life or have played a role in my life, then I would just either ask them to if they wanted to be on the list, or I just put them on the list. And if they didn't like it, they would just tell me. Not it hasn't happened very too many times, but it has happened. The reason I started that is because it no matter how I wake up, I usually wake up in a pretty good mood. But regardless of what I have going on in my head that day or that morning, forcing myself to write that gratitude list always shifts my mind to a place of gratitude. And you can't be upset and grateful at the same time. And so I
Yep.
use it as a hack to get my day started.
Yeah, that's awesome. The other thing about gratitude is it's one of the higher frequency vibrations to the universe, which is really interesting because the more that you're grateful, the more that you actually are attracting that kind of stuff back to you, which is really cool. You said something really interesting. You said something that caught my attention because I was just talking about it this morning. So you said usually every day you wake up, you're in a pretty good mood. Is that the truth?
Yeah, dude, because I'm a morning person. I like getting up early. I look forward to the day. I pray. I usually pray at night. I usually pray in the morning. And so, yeah, I do usually wake up in a pretty good mood. I'm excited because I'm going to the gym. I love the gym. My, and I spend about, I don't know, 3 hours at least just hanging out with me and just doing my thing in the morning, which is my favorite 3 hours of the day.
Yeah, the reason I asked that, so I went to the gym this morning and I got a little bit of a late start. And the person that I went to the gym with, we were having a conversation. And when we got out of the gym, I was like, and maybe I'm wrong here because you just said you're a morning person. But in my mind, you hear those people all the time that are like, I'm not a morning person. I can't do it. I'm not a morning person. Well, fuck, I'm not a morning person either, dude. Like when I wake up, I don't pop out of bed just like super stoked to go to the gym. I wake up and I'm tired and I don't really want to get up, but I get myself up anyways because every time I get up early and go to the gym, never do I get done doing that and say to myself, I wish I wouldn't have done that. So when you say you're a morning person, do you just you wake up and it's just pop out of bed and you're ready to go? Or do you think you've just disciplined yourself long enough to where it's gotten easier?
I think discipline has a lot to do with it because I was gonna ask you, which kind of it falls right into the same category. I go to bed pretty consistently at the same time every night, and
That's key.
it's key. And so routine for me is it's important. And so as long as I get in bed at my normal time, if I'm asleep by 9 o'clock, which is for some people that's like they're just getting started. But for me, if I get started, if I go to sleep at 9 and I wake up at 4, that's a pretty, I mean, it's 7 hours if I sleep the whole time, which I'm probably not going to sleep exactly the whole time. But if I can get 6.5 hours sleep, I'm ready to roll.
Yeah. So 9 o'clock, that's pretty early. Do you have a process that you follow before you go to bed so that you can start to slow down your mind and you're not sitting there in bed for an hour or two before you actually pass out? Or is your mind still pretty busy at 9 o'clock and it takes you a while to go to bed sometimes?
So I think it depends. So if I've got something that I'm trying to control, that's outside of my control, that's eating my lunch, or in something that I'm trying. If it could be that I had a conversation with Maddie and maybe it didn't go really well, that usually doesn't happen. Or it could be something with work that is not maybe not going the way I want it to go.
Yeah.
And those nights are much tougher. And some of those nights I don't sleep. And if I miss a certain window of time, I have a hard time sleeping. Now, I will tell you, I just stopped taking Ambien. It's probably been 3 months ago, approximately. And I'd taken it for probably 20 years. And I talked to my buddy, Doug Wyatt. I don't know if you know Doug, you will know him.
I
And
know him. I
you
don't
know
really
Doug.
know him, but I know of him. Yeah.
Yeah. He explained to me the how important sleep was. And he told me about two books. Why We Sleep, I think, is one of them, and Breathe is the other one, because I told him I snore. And so I've stopped taking Ambien and I take melatonin at night. If I take it consistently, sometimes it stops working. So I may pop a Tylenol PM, but I still believe that it's got to be better than taking Ambien every night.
Ambien's a serious drug, dude.
Yeah.
Did you like withdraw from that, or did you go a long time without being able to sleep? Some people can have pretty bad come downs off of Ambien, believe it or not.
So I tapered. Of course, I didn't talk to my doctor about it, but I can't imagine they would have told me to do it any other way, but maybe. Either way, I just cut it in half, took it for 5 or 6 days, cut it in half. And I wasn't taking a huge amount, but and then I started taking melatonin. So to answer your question, it really wasn't a terrible transition. But I think a lot of that, and you'll get this, is I made up my mind
Oh yeah.
that I was going to stop taking Ambien, and that was it. You
It's
know,
crazy how powerful that little shift in a mindset can be. And it's hard to explain that to somebody because a lot of times people ask me like how I got sober, and it's such a hard question to answer because it looks a little bit different for everybody. But at the end of the day, when I quit this last time, I made the decision that no matter what the emotion, no matter what the circumstance, no matter what the stress, I was never going to pick up another substance. And I haven't looked back.
yeah.
And, but I don't know why that just doesn't click for certain people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and your journey's a bit different than mine in that I don't know without having a recovery program for me. I'm not so sure. I don't think I could have done it if I'm being honest with you. And part of we get into the story, you'll understand why I say that because once I got away from that, the program, I made decisions that ultimately I couldn't say I was sober anymore. I wasn't drinking, but I wasn't sober. And there's a big difference there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was a lot of stuff that led up to me getting to the point of making that decision, which I can get into in a bit, but it was an internal thing. But once I made that decision, I haven't looked back, and the power of making a decision is extremely powerful. So I want to ask you, tell me a little bit about life growing up. What did your life look like growing up?
I grew up in I grew up in probably one of the nicest neighborhoods in my town. I grew up in Mayberry, like the Andy Griffith show. It's it's just a small town. Everybody knows everybody. I grew up on a golf course and at a country club, and my parents, we weren't by any stretch the wealthiest people by any stretch. In fact, we were probably the least wealthy of the people in the neighborhood, which has its
Mayberry, North Carolina.
yeah, it was Mount Airy, North Carolina now, but it is
Okay.
like it was Mayberry, where like, everything started being filmed, and yeah, so everything's still Mayberry downtown today. And so I grew up around people that were doctors and attorneys, and they had everything that they possibly wanted. So I always felt like I didn't fit in. I always felt like I just felt like I was different. And it wasn't because I lacked for anything, because I had everything, really anything that I wanted. And I think part of that led into some of the decisions that I made because I didn't have a whole lot of boundaries. My dad and mom split when I was 12, so I was with my mom pretty much after that. My dad was still in the picture, but he traveled. And so our boundaries, we didn't have a lot of boundaries. And I got into a lot of trouble. I got into trouble at the age of 5. I got caught stealing, and age 10, I burnt down a barn, and the
Got
list
caught
goes on.
stealing at 5?
Yeah,
Where does that come from?
that's a great question. Just no, I don't know. I don't know.
That's that's pretty interesting because usually if we're doing that kind of stuff that young, it's usually coming from something. Like I got caught stealing people's wallets from Seven Peaks, which is a water resort. I was going around and freaking jacking people's wallets at 12 years old and got caught and got taken to the police station. But later on, I did some therapy and learned that I got sexually abused by my third grade teacher when I was 8 years old.
Holy shit.
So that's really when I started acting out. Like I really started acting out because it created an internal belief system in me that something was wrong with me and I was broken and I don't know, just I wasn't good enough and I started surrounding myself. I think I started attracting those kind of kids in my life and I really just started acting out a ton. And so it's interesting that that happened at 5 years old. I'm not saying that something like that happened to you. It's just I wonder what put you in that kind of mindset at such a young age.
Only thing I can figure is I was a spoiled kid. And so I didn't really 5, but there was a level, there's always been a level of entitlement. There's always been a level of I should be in another place. I should be higher. I should be doing better. I should be making more money. I should be in a different place than where I am.
Yeah.
That carried on for a while.
Do you, what did your parents do for work? Because you said that you guys were middle class in comparison to like the other people around you.
Yeah, so my mom was a school teacher, so she made no money. my dad he worked on the tobacco market. So he made pretty good money. I don't know, back then, maybe 100 grand, maybe. I'm not sure really to today's dollars what that would be. But he did pretty well, but he traveled 6, 7, 8 months out of the year. So really, when they divorced, there wasn't a real huge difference in how I was being parented. My mom would have a little brother that's 3 years younger than me. He didn't really get into a lot of trouble. And so it was a lot for my mom to handle, I think, looking back.
Yeah. Did your parents, the entitlement that you talked about, did your parents, they're surrounded by all of these rich people that have a lot of stuff. Do you think that got to them at all? And that in turn translated to transmuted to you? Do you think that's where you picked some of it up? Or do you think it was solely because you saw all of these people around you that
I think it's
had everything that they wanted?
I think it's both because we were a member at the country club, but we were like we were in debt up to our ears. And of course I didn't realize that then, but there for us to, I don't know, there'd be a minimum at the country club and we would have to we would have to make that every month, and it would be a conversation about what day of the week or what day of the month we were going to go spend this $200 at the to just make the minimum to be able to be a member there. So it was almost like we were scraping by to a degree to stay up with the Joneses, so to speak.
Yeah. So when your parents got divorced at 12 years old, you said that it didn't really change a whole lot just because your dad was already like traveling a lot and stuff, but did it
Okay.
affect you in different ways?
It did actually. So it did. I shouldn't have said that it didn't change a lot because actually, I think that is when things really turned for me because we moved out of the country club to the other side of town, which was devastating because I'd grown up with these kids all my life, and we moved across the way, and now I don't have these friends anymore. They're just turned their back on me. And my mom she had dated this guy, but I guess in college for years. He went to the army, she went to college. Maybe that's what happened. And this guy, after 20 years or 15 years, pops back into my mom's life. It was an accident. They just happened to see each other walking through town and started talking, and he was getting a divorce, she was getting a divorce. So now I've got this dude who I had zero respect for, and he was starting to come around, and then he eventually moved in, and he wasn't a bad guy. I just didn't I was just I hated him, right? Because
Yeah.
now, for whatever reason, I hated him. And so, yeah, that took a lot, it took a toll on my psyche, moving and realizing like I'm not in the same group that I was in before. It was like literally moving across the tracks.
Yeah. Did your dad pretty quickly start dating anybody?
I mean, he moved to Tennessee. But quite frankly, Justin, we saw him more after they got divorced than we did before.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking that question is once you start looking into the amount of effect that your the development of a child's brain is so fundamental, and it will affect somebody's life for the rest of their life, whether they're conscious of it or not. So that thing that happened to me when I was 8 years old, I literally blocked it out for over 15 years, and I blocked it out. And when I hear people tell me that they block stuff out, I thought they were full of shit. But I literally blocked it out until I was in a group therapy session later on. But That's another story.
Did you
But
block it out? But subconsciously you couldn't have blocked it, right?
no, subconsciously that was my point. Subconsciously, it was just still affecting the way that I was viewing the world. It was affecting the way that I was living life. It was affecting the way that I viewed myself and the lack of like self-worth that I had for myself. It was affecting me, but I didn't realize it.
Right.
And that's scary, dude. So that's the reason I'm asking you these questions is because usually a lot of times the stuff that we learn about ourselves later on in life is correlated to things that happened to us when we were growing up.
Yes, I agree.
So did it make you the guy that your mom started dating, did you just initially hate him? Were you mad at your mom for
I don't think I was mad at my mom. I wasn't very cooperative. I didn't really listen to him. He was just, I didn't feel like I needed to listen to him. I have a dad. I don't need to listen to you. And we did everything possible to get him to leave. We put sugar in his gas tank, just some really gnarly shit. And if it had been me, I probably would have killed me if I would have been him. I should have said. It was rough going. It was rough going. And plus he had two kids and it was just it was a lot of changes. It was a lot of changes. And
yeah.
I would say that's probably when I started smoking cigarettes,
How old were
um,
you when you started doing that?
probably 12 or 13.
So was that the first thing that you tried, like
Yeah.
substance wise, was smoking cigarettes?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. And then where did it go from there?
So, I had a buddy of mine. This was probably in junior high. So I want to say 13, 14 years old. He lived in a neighboring town, like in Virginia, and he had a four wheelers and all kinds of shit. And so I would go out to his house on the weekends, and that's where I first drank. And the best way I can describe when I first drank was my anxiety was gone. Like I felt like I could talk better, I could think quicker. I felt comfortable in my own skin.
Yeah.
And so I wanted more of that
Oh yeah.
every
I
chance
get
I could
that.
get.
Yep.
And then it stopped working.
So do you've already talked about it a little bit, but do you know where that underlying feeling like came from at that age? I guess it could be a mixture of a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, but
I can't pinpoint a specific like situation, like sort of like you alluded to. I don't have anything that I could really point it to like that. I just
do you ever
always
remember
felt,
not feeling like that?
well, I tell you, so yeah, around seventh grade, so I was a fat kid, and this could play into it. I was a fat kid, and we finished up sixth grade, and we went to a pool. I went to a pool party with the same kids from the neighborhood in the first neighborhood. And I walked up. I talk about this in my book, actually. I walked up and got on the diving board, and you know how you bounce up and down the diving board? My boobs would flap up and down because I was fat. And so these girls asked me after I got out of the pool to do it again. And I'm thinking, oh, they must think I'm cute. So I do it again and I get out, and one of them asked me if I ever thought about wearing a training bra. So I was fucking crushed. I mean, it was the most embarrassing thing. I can't think of too many more things that would have been that embarrassing. And so that summer, dude, I dieted and I lost weight and I've never gained that weight back. So I think the insecurity maybe started from me being fat.
Yeah, that's a pretty That's pretty young to, so how old were you when you were on the diving board and that
12.
happened?
12.
12?
Yeah.
And the girl said something and then you dieted that summer?
Yes, I did.
That's pretty crazy if you think about it, dude.
Yeah.
12
With
years old to already like start worrying about that stuff to the point where you're gonna like from your own decision like choose to start dieting. That's pretty impactful.
I was never going through that again. And I haven't. And I won't.
So you've never fell off the wagon in regards to that aspect again?
Nope. Nope. I mean, don't get me wrong. If I gained a few pounds here and there, yeah, but it's never gone. It's never gone to the point where I've been uncomfortable.
So you started drinking a little bit around, was that around 12 years old too?
I'd
13 years
say
old?
around 13, 14.
13,
Yeah.
14. And you instantly felt that release of, oh, this is what I'm supposed to feel like.
Yeah. And I hated the taste, dude. It was awful. But the feeling outweighed the taste and it outweighed throwing up. I just wanted the feeling. I just wanted to feel comfortable. I just wanted to feel normal. And that's what made me feel normal.
Where'd you get it from?
That kid's house. His mom was she kind of just did her own thing and left us there all weekend. She'd be at her boyfriend's house. So we just did whatever we wanted to.
How often did that start happening?
Probably 2, 3 weekends a month. Yeah, I would say so.
That's quite
Every,
a bit at that age, though.
yeah, every chance I got.
And then how did it progress?
I started, it's interesting. I got my first DUI when I was 16 years old, but I hadn't been drinking. At this point, I didn't drink. So that little stint of going to that guy's house on the weekend didn't last, I don't know, 6 or 8 months maybe. I started dating this girl that was a preacher's daughter. And so I didn't have, I wasn't drinking, but I had a wreck, a really bad wreck. I don't know, 15 or 20 days after I got my license and almost killed the girl that was with me and almost killed this other lady that I hit head on. It was a really bad accident. And I smoked cigarettes, and the deal was I could get my license if I quit smoking cigarettes. Well, I didn't quit. So I had this pina colada spray in my vehicle that I thought was going to cover the smell up. Well, the cop, who was my first cousin, who was also the person who was called when I got caught stealing at 5, was the first one on the scene. And they smelled the pina colada spray and they gave me a DUI. It was on the front page of the paper with the wreck. They gave me a blood test naturally and it came back 0, but it doesn't matter because it's already been on the front page of the paper. Um, which was a really tough time because I was dating this preacher's daughter. Her name was involved with it. It just not a good situation. And so I had switched schools um, in my 11th grade year, and I hadn't really got into drinking at this point. I hadn't really got into it. But after that wreck, I was separated from her parents, didn't want anything to do with her. And so I switched back to Mount Airy High School in my 12th grade year. And that's really where I picked up drinking because I was going to parties with the same people that I grew up with. I was kind of back in that same crowd, and they all smoked weed and drank, and we could always do it at somebody else's house. And so that's really where my drinking picked up around my 12th grade year. Uh,
Did you fight that DUI?
oh yeah, it was completely
So
dismissed.
you fought the DUI, but it was still out there to everybody.
Exactly, it was dismissed because my blood came back and it was 0. But still, living in a small town, everybody found out. Probably not shocked, but
Yeah.
Still, it is what it is.
So how was junior high and high school for you? I know that you mentioned that seventh grade was tough and you went on your diet, but like in general, did you have a lot of friends? Were you part of the popular crew? Did you play sports? It's such an awkward age because you're still trying to figure out who you are and somehow fit in. But how was that experience?
So I played sports up until seventh grade, everything, baseball, football. I played golf because I grew up on a golf course. But seventh grade, I lost that weight in between sixth and seventh grade, and I thought this is going to be my year. But the reality was, I wasn't great in school, and a lot of the kids that I'd grown up with, they were good in school. So I wound up with being in the not so great crowd. I mean, because I was looking for acceptance, I was looking for people that I guess smoked cigarettes, and I took shop class. So my choices of classes were like, me take the easiest fucking class that I could possibly take. And that breeds the same people, right? The people that are trying to take the easy road. So seventh and eighth grade was not, it wasn't an easy time because of my choice of people that I hung out with. Because I didn't feel comfortable hanging out. I was really not accepted, it felt, with the crowd that I'd been with because I moved. And so I just kind of hung out with people that were not really on the right path, so to speak. Wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean they were on a wrong path. And actually, now I think about it, I did drink during that time. Not a ton, but I did drink during that time with my other buddy. Now that I think about it, yeah.
So you did you meet your that preacher's girlfriend at your new school when you moved schools?
So I'd met her before I moved schools, and then
Okay.
that was part of the reason that I moved. And I actually, the reason I moved back to Mount Airy High School is because I skipped so many days my 12th grade year, and I was going to fail. And like a lot of times, my dad called the principal because he knew the principal, got me back in. I wound up making all A's and one B. Yeah, so I initially moved for the girl and then moved back because I was going to fail.
Were the grades because you didn't apply yourself, or have you had some difficulty with learning and that type of stuff?
I do have ADHD, and I'm sure, I don't remember if you have ADHD or not, but putting me in a box room and having me sit still for 8 hours is just not conducive for me. It's just not, it's not going to work. And I didn't apply myself because I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I just wasn't very good in school. I just wasn't very good.
Yeah, I was I was diagnosed ADHD and depressed and bipolar. And like the whole reason I'm saying this right now is just be careful when a doctor gives you a diagnosis because I am not on one prescription medication anymore, and I am clearer than I have ever been in my life. And a lot of time, and by the way, I'm a huge mental health proponent. I understand that in certain cases, medication can do a good job, but a lot of times that stuff that we're trying to solve through medication is really just something going on internally. And if we work from the inside out, then a lot of times we can figure that stuff out without having to have some kind of medication. And I believe that certain things like ADHD are actually a superpower when you can learn to harness them and focus them in the right direction. I think a lot of times we just focus those things in the wrong direction, and yeah, they can become bad. But when you focus that stuff in a positive direction, it can be a superpower. And most of the most successful entrepreneurs out there have some type of mental, I don't like to call it a disability, but that's what people would call it. I think it's a mental ability, but whether it's ADHD or autism, a lot of these entrepreneurs have these things. And the only difference between them and some of the people that really struggle with those things is, number one, they learn to focus it in a positive direction. And then number two, they switch their perspective on it, because the story that we tell ourselves is always true.
That's right.
And so if you're looking at that stuff in a negative way, it's going to affect you negatively. If you tell, oh, I've got ADHD and depression and it's fucking killing me and I can't do anything about it and it's ruined. Yeah, that's gonna happen. But if you take that stuff, I've got ADHD, I'm gonna use this to fucking smash. I've got autism, I'm gonna use that intelligence to do shit that nobody else can do. That slight shift in perspective is a game changer.
100%. And I think maybe we've even talked about this. Like when you feel like you're in flow, when you feel like you are at your absolute best, I'm gonna guess that's when you're having a conversation with one of your partners and you're talking about how you're going to collaborate. You're in the conversation. Now, let's shift that for a second. When you're sitting in front of a fucking computer trying to figure out a fucking spreadsheet, it's, I want to jump out the window. So it's, if you can figure out where your strengths are, like what I'm talking about, because I'm exactly the same way, it'll take me 4.5 hours to figure out a spreadsheet, opposed to I can have a conversation with somebody all day long and make 10 times the progress than
Yep.
I will sitting in front of that spreadsheet.
Yep. Yep. So you got to figure out where your strengths are, and you got to bring people on to help you out where you're not strong.
That's right.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And if you do have to do some spreadsheet work or some things that are difficult when you have a busy mind, one of the things that you can do to help with that is you want to move your body somehow. So even if you're doing a little like leg stepper under your desk, or even if you just tap your desk like with your hand while you're doing work on the spreadsheet, if you want to slow down your mind, you have to move into your body. So for people, that's why, like, going to the gym, why do you think it's so easy to get into a flow state when you go to the gym? Because you're moving your body and it naturally slows down this mind and your thoughts become clear. Why is it easy for athletes to get into flow state? Because they're doing a physical activity and they're moving their body, and that naturally slows down their mind, and they can just focus.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah. And I think the awareness of knowing what you're good at and the awareness of knowing what you're not good at
100%.
is key, because if
Yes.
if you don't know, then you're going to keep banging your head against the wall trying to figure out this thing that you were not supposed to figure out to begin with.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
I'm only saying that stuff just as it helps to do something with the body if you are trying to slow down the mind, but I'm with you. At Chirp, I'm really good at what I do. It's like a superpower. I'm really good relationship builder. I'm really good at going out and getting partnerships, but I am not good at building systems and processes. I'm not good at HubSpot. I'm not good at onboarding commission software. I brought on a girl sales manager to do all of that stuff for me because, number one, I'm not good at it. Number two, it takes me forever. And number three, I don't fucking like to do it, dude.
Right.
I
Right.
don't want to. I don't want to do that kind of stuff.
It's not where you're best suited. It's not beneficial for you or the company for you to be doing the things that you're not good at. People say,
Yep.
focus on the things you're not good at. Absolutely don't do that.
Yep.
You find someone that can help you do those things.
Yep. And it's a skill to be able to recognize what you're good at and what you're not good at. And some people just have a hard time admitting that they're not good at certain things. And it makes life a lot harder when you're not just willing to say, okay, here's my strengths and here's what I'm not so good at. And I'm going to focus on this and have somebody else help here.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I
So,
agree with
all
you.
right, that was a good talk right there. How did it progress? So I think we're at like 12th grade. Did you graduate?
I graduated all A's and B's, and and this is interesting. This is a great segue. So I took a job. So my dad was the vice president of a tobacco company, and I took a job with the tobacco company. And the job was I was training to be a buyer. Let me explain what that means. So, like following sale, they don't do this anymore, but I was being trained to follow sale, like an auctioneer auctioning tobacco, hand signals. It was wild. And so that first year, that year that I worked for him, I my main job was to learn how to follow sale and to drive the people around that were, if you want to call executives or whatever they were, because the tobacco industry is a drinking culture. 5 o'clock every day, they're all in the hospitality room that's completely stocked to the ceiling with anything you can think of. And it was okay for me to drink as well. Even though I was 18 years old, it didn't really matter, right? This is just a different industry. And so that is where, truthfully, that's where my drinking really took off because it was free. I was able to drink whenever I wanted to, damn near encouraged, to be honest with you. And so that's when my alcohol abuse really kicked in
Was it every day?
every day. I mean,
Would you drink
5 days a week. Yeah.
5 days a week? And most of the people that were doing it with you do you think that they were like, were they able to control it, or do you think it was a lot of alcohol?
Everybody was an alcoholic. I'm pretty certain.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, dude. I mean, it was like every day. Not at 5:01, at 5 o'clock. Everybody was
Did
in
you
that.
realize that it was a problem, or to you, was it just, oh man, everyone's doing this. This is normal.
It wasn't a problem for me because I felt normal for the first, like I felt normal when I drank. So this was like a new lease on life for me. This was the best thing that could have ever happened. Now I get to get paid, and every day at 5 o'clock I get to drink. Sign me up. Yeah.
So how did it slowly get into drinking on the weekends and drinking after work, or how did it progress from there?
Yeah, so it just didn't really stop. I drank every day. I started drinking every day, and yeah, I would drink on the weekends for sure. Um, wasn't really doing a lot of drugs. In fact, I wasn't doing any drugs really at that time. I'd smoke a little bit of weed, but weed and alcohol wasn't. It didn't really serve me well at the same time. I would always choose alcohol over weed because alcohol helped some people it slows them down and makes them tired. It did the opposite for me. I was ready to go. And so weed would slow me down. I would be tired. I wouldn't be able to think as much. So it just really wasn't that appealing to me.
So oh, sorry, were you gonna go ahead? Were you
No,
gonna
go
say
for it.
something? Oh, when was the first time that you realized it was a problem, even though it made you feel good? When was the first time that you were like, damn, even though this makes me feel good, I can't control it?
I started working at a restaurant. So I only worked 6 months out of the year at this job. I got paid for 12, but I only had to work six because of tobacco season. So when I finished that first 6 months, I would play golf every day and drink on the golf course regularly. And so then I started working in a restaurant because I wound up not going back to that job, which is a whole different story. But I started working at a restaurant. If you know anything about restaurants, it's pretty easy to drink at a restaurant. And by this point, I had started doing drugs. So I would say I was around maybe 19, yeah, 19, 19 and a half, somewhere in that vicinity. And I was working at a restaurant. So I couldn't drink at the restaurant, but I could drink on the way home. And so I worked about an hour away. And so to answer your question, every night I would buy two 40-ounce ice house and drink them before I would get to my destination in Mount Airy. And then I'd drink a third one when I got there.
And
That's,
then
yeah,
and then you mentioned you started to get into some drugs at that point. I'm not sure during that time how it was there, but I know in Utah, cocaine's pretty big in the restaurant industry. So is that kind of what introduced you to start getting into some drugs?
actually crushing up my Ritalin and then cocaine. So
Okay,
one and the same.
so you had Ritalin for your ADHD.
Yep.
How long were you on that for? When did you first get prescribed that?
8 years old. Yeah.
I don't want to come across the wrong way on this podcast, people, because I know it can come across offensive to some people, especially parents that have kids and they're just trying to do the best that they can and trying to help their kids out. But I will say, just think twice before you just go and put a kid on some kind of heavy prescription medication. So, 8 years old, did you take it as prescribed?
I'm sure I did at 8. But it's interesting because I remember at that early age when I would take it, my palms would sweat. I wouldn't get very hungry. I would feel really nervous because you're taking an amphetamine. And at 8 years old, it's really like doing a line of cocaine is really what it was like. And I wondered, I really did believe for years that probably led me to drugs and alcohol. But what I've discovered, so before I wrote my book, I interviewed like 50 different ADHD professionals because I wanted to understand why I do the things that I do. I wanted to understand why if I could leave my keys somewhere and I can't find it for 4 hours. I wanted to understand why it just why I couldn't get out of my own way. And unanimously, what I figured out was if I hadn't have been on medication, the drugs and alcohol would have probably been far worse, which is not what I thought for years. I thought for sure, and I'm still not totally convinced that's 100% the case. I think that the Ritalin likely started that desire to feel different.
Yeah,
Even
that's
right?
pretty interesting. Yeah. Did you ever go without it? Like when you were,
No.
you never went without it.
For yeah, for 25 or I don't even know how many years. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, really
The only reason I ask is because when you go without it, then you really start to see what it's doing for you. But it sounds like you just took it pretty consistently and for the most part, probably as prescribed while you were growing up until the restaurant and you started sniffing it a little bit.
that's right. And it's interesting because I hear people say they'll take it by mouth and they can just keep taking it. Like just like an addict would do. That was never really my experience. But when I snorted it, I would be up for days. I mean, I would just like it, like just couldn't really stop. And I would be, it's just like if you've just finished up an 8 ball and you're just completely locked up and your mind's running a million miles an hour, but you don't really want to talk to anybody or see anybody.
Yeah.
I would get the exact same way with Ritalin, the same way.
So what made you decide to crush it and snort it? Because you had done it for so long and you had taken it by mouth, kind of as prescribed. What made you all of a sudden one day be like, I'm gonna crush this bitch up and take it to the dome?
I'm guessing somebody probably was doing it around me. I really don't remember, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But you do remember that it was a different feeling when you did that?
100%. Yeah, for sure. And it would be, and I would do it working in the restaurant. I'd go in the bathroom and crush it up. And it's a wonder, like, I'm not even sure how I function, to be honest with you.
Yeah, but when you were doing it, it made you feel like that you were way better at whatever you were doing, right?
Yeah, 100%.
That's one of the challenges that comes with when you stop doing that stuff is you've gotten into this habit of telling yourself over and over that I'm so much better at this
Yep.
when I do this substance. And so when you remove the substance, whether it be from sports or work or whatever it is, it's hard to get back out of that mindset that you can actually be more productive without it.
I think it's a depletion of dopamine. I think because when you're sorting Ritalin or whatever it is, there's a rush of dopamine from this substance that you're not used to having. And so then when you've got to go without it, it's almost like you've got a depletion of
Yep.
dopamine.
Yep. All right. So walk me through kind of the next little while in your life. So you're at the restaurant, you're drinking, you're crushing up your Ritalin. Where does it go from there?
So I moved to Charlotte to go to college, and I did enroll and I did go a little bit, but the truth of the matter was I got there. My God, I got alcohol poisoning the first night I was there. If that tells you any idea how things went. And I had to come home for 3 days. Like I was so sick. And it didn't really matter. Like I was just ready to get back after that 3 days. And so I didn't go a day without drinking. So that was really that first year in school. I That was when I had to go to my first rehab. And I don't remember if I'd gotten a DUI yet. Probably. So I got two DUIs back to back in Charlotte. When I say back to back, 30 days apart by the same cop on,
Like legit DUIs, you were drinking,
yeah,
got busted, and got charged with a DUI.
yep.
You have to do jail time?
No. And the reason I didn't is because I got charged for the first one second and the second one first. Because if they would have been charged consecutively, I was going to lose my license for 8 years. My attorney said, this is how we're going to do it. And that's how we did it. So I only lost my license for 4 years. And so I still drove naturally. Uh, and it turns out I didn't work anyway because I got my license back after that 4 years for one day. And the next day, I get a letter from the DMV saying, no, 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 you're not driving for another 4 years. So the plan didn't work. But in between all that time, I mean, I would get up and drink vodka before I was working in restaurants. I would get up and drink vodka before I went, like a pint glass, pretty much full of vodka. It was one of my worst times for sure.
I want to touch on a couple things here because I think this is really interesting. So you went to college, you blacked out or got alcohol poisoning your first night. You got two DUIs pretty quickly thereafter. You went to rehab, right?
Yep.
Was that influenced by your mom or your dad? Was that you? Was it the courts that had you go? Do you remember?
It wasn't, it may have been suggested by my attorney. I don't recall. I knew I was in bad shape though.
Was it an inpatient?
Yeah,
How long did you go for?
2 weeks.
So did you not complete the program?
I did, but it was more of a drunk tank. It was more of a, it wasn't like a 30-day rehab. It was like come here and get cleaned up and then go to the next spot. I just didn't go to the next spot.
Yeah, okay. My last one was 73 days,
Yeah.
70 inpatient program. So the reason I brought that up is because I'm always trying to figure out what gets somebody sober. I think if we had the answer, there would probably be like a set in, and I know you follow the AA program, and I know that works really well for some people, but it also like there are people that go to AA and drink again, right? So that I don't think there's one miracle solution that everyone can just follow step by step and all right, I'm going to stay sober for the rest of my life. External consequences do not, it's really interesting. External consequences are not always the thing that is going to drive somebody to change. And you would think that they would. You would think that getting your first DUI would, and then your second DUI, and then going to rehab. And you would think all of these things would make somebody stop and think, fuck, I have a problem. I'm not going to do this anymore. But it's not quite that simple. And so, in my opinion, it's more of an internal thing, but we can get to that a little bit later on. So, you got out of rehab 2 weeks. Where do you go from there?
Less than a week, I was drinking again. And
How much
uh,
were you drinking at this point?
mm, that's a good question. I really, I would be honest, I don't know.
Was it more hard liquor, beer,
Not at the
mixture?
time. I depend maybe shots, like it was like going out to a club or there was some ecstasy going on in there as well.
Do you have
So
any small moments in there where you wanted to quit?
no, not really.
Okay,
Not
so you hadn't
the
even
only
gotten
reason
to
I
the,
would want to quit is because to get out of the thing I was in trouble for or
yeah,
whatever it was. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, there was really no desire to quit. In fact, I didn't really think I'd ever quit. I couldn't really ever see myself not drinking, to be honest. Uh, it was,
And is that because it made you feel so good, or is that because you didn't think you had a problem?
but I knew I believe I had from early to early on. I would always say, yeah, I'm an alcoholic. Not in the sense that I say it now, just kind of as this is just, it was almost like an identity.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, I knew I had a problem, but I'm so prideful that I always felt like I was the one person that would be able to figure it out and control it.
Yeah.
So I never fully quite wanted to give it up because even though I was gonna stop doing it like I was doing it, I could still just do it a little bit here and there. And I was smart enough and strong enough to be able to figure it out.
Yeah.
But
You
that I
know,
went through that for years.
yeah. Pride and ego is, it is probably one of the most powerful things to have to try to overcome, in my opinion. It has been for me for many years. I mean, even sober years is still, and there's different levels of it. And it could be what you're talking about. I can quit when I want to, but I'm just going to do this. Or it could be, I'm just not going to tell anybody that I'm going through this thing. There's so many different levels of pride and ego that can just smash you to death.
I agree.
And sometimes it's hard to even recognize when that's happening.
So how do you recognize it?
I have to step back and think about what are my intentions here? And, and am I looking at this from everyone's perspective, or is it just my perspective? There may be something that I don't agree with that someone does at work potentially or in our relationship. And I have to look at, am I looking at this of just how it affects me, or am I looking at it at where that person could be coming from? It's really empathy in putting myself in their shoes. And I can't all the time, I can't necessarily always put myself in their shoes because I don't know what they're going through. I don't know what kind of day this person's having for them to make this decision. And the only way, and this is where I fail sometimes, is if I communicate well and I ask good questions. And sometimes I assume that I know because of my pride and ego, but my assumption's wrong because I didn't ask the right question, or I didn't ask any question, or I didn't communicate. And that's hard. And I deal with that regularly. I think that I know what someone's thinking or what their intentions are, but it, and I don't want to ask because I think I already know.
Yeah. It's interesting that you're talking about this right now. I think the key takeaway here is we will never have it all figured out. There's always room for improvement, and we can always continue to work on ourselves. Me personally, right now, my word for 2025 is leadership. The reason that's my word is because you would think that somebody like me that's gone through everything that I've gone through and been at the bottom of the bottom would be the most patient and empathetic person in the world. It didn't work out like that for me. The exact opposite. Because I have been through everything that I've been through and I overcame it and I took accountability for life and stopped making excuses. I have very little patience for people that don't live life the same way. And I don't tend to give people the benefit of the doubt. And I'm super passionate. And unfortunately, with what I've been through and the mindset that I have mixed with that passion, unfortunately, when I'm trying to bring people up with me, I'm actually bringing people down. And so that is what I'm working on in 2025 is being a little more empathetic towards people, giving people the benefit of the doubt, and really trying to be a leader that people want to follow because they respect them and they want to work hard for them, and not a leader that people are afraid of. So it's a challenge.
So tell me what happens, because obviously there's a time that you can think of that this exact thing happened. And looking back, you wish you could have had the leadership mindset that you're talking about now. How did you recognize that and then correct it?
Yeah, one specific situation would be at Chirp. I've built this partnership program and I like value keeping my word these days. And when I create these partnerships and when our sales team and they're referring us deals and our sales team is closing those deals, and We tell people that they're going to get white glove support because that we take pride in it and we're going to take care of them. And don't get me wrong, we do a really good job at that. But there was a person on the support side of the team that didn't really take care of a big partner of ours and one of their customers. And it upset me. It upset me because I've put a ton of work and energy into this partnership. And when I tell a partner that we're going to do something, I expect us to do it. And this person on that side of things, this is going to sound bad, man, but not everybody's going to be like me. They might be here more just to have a job, and it doesn't mean that they're like doing a bad job. They don't care as much as I do. And what I ended up learning was, yeah, they dropped the ball and they admitted that. But they were also working on building out a software for the customer success manager team for us to be able to track the health of accounts. And so they were really focused on getting that software built out. And long term, that's super important. And so in their minds, that's why they kind of dropped the ball over here, is because they were focused over here. And if I would have just taken a little bit of time to understand where they were coming from, my approach could have been a lot different. Do I agree with how they did it? I still don't agree with it. I still think that they could have been doing this and taking care of the partner at the same time. But that's not what's important. What's important is I came across wrong to that person, and I think I kind of hurt their feelings. And that's not the type of person that I want to be. I want to be the type of person that even if I don't agree with someone, I can go have a real conversation with that person and I can bring them up. And the way that I've been approaching those types of things, I haven't been getting that kind of result. And so that's on me. So that's something that I realize I got to work on. That was
because
a long answer. Hopefully that made sense, but
it did. It's because you're so personally invested in the partner and it's tied to your word, and the partner doesn't give a shit if it fails because you're the guy that said it's not
yep,
going to fail.
yep.
So
It's a hard situation to be in, dude.
it affects your character.
Yeah. And that's
That's
something that I take a lot of pride in these days. A lot.
yes, me too. For somebody to assassinate my character is probably the worst thing that you could do to me.
Yeah. And they're still an employee here. I've still got to do what I can to make the most of them and give them an opportunity. And so I definitely haven't figured it out. Let's just put it that way. But the good thing is it was Ryan Fenn, the owner of Chirp. He's the one that really, I already knew it. Like deep down, I knew it. But he pulled me into his office and had a conversation with me and just let me know that, hey, man, we really need to work on this because we want this to be a place where people enjoy coming to work and they feel like they can be comfortable here and they feel like there's opportunity for growth here. And I may not have been bringing that to the table as much as I should. So, anyways, he had the conversation with me, and for whatever reason, it really hit. And the good thing is, even though I don't have it figured out yet, I'm noticing it. I'm noticing it all the time. I'm noticing it in relationships outside of work. I'm noticing it with friendships. I'm noticing it at work. Like I'm just starting to be a lot more conscious
Yeah.
of that challenge that I have in general, which is a good thing because that means that I'm like thinking about it before I'm just reacting to something.
So what if you treated this person, as challenging as it may be, what if you treated them like you would a partner?
Yeah.
because there'd be a different kind of conversation, right? You wouldn't have that conversation with a partner the way you had it with the support guy.
That's a really good point. It's a really good point. I'll think about that.
Yeah. I mean, think about if you were trying to bring on a huge partner, whoever that might be, and you're talking with them, you're just having conversations, you're building the relationship, it's dating, right? And it's the same kind of the same thing with this individual. You're starting a little bit in the rears because you've already made them feel like shit or whatever you did. But it's kind of like you got to build that relationship on that side as well. I don't, I'm focused on what I need to do, which is part of the problem, right? I'm focused on what benefits the company, what benefits me. And sometimes I don't think about the support people. They're like, they just should do their job, and that's not my part of it until it affects me. But if I have a good relationship with the support team, then they're probably going to work harder for me.
I know. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, that is really what that's the growth that I'm focused on right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's really just trying to put yourself in that person's shoes and understand that our goals and the things that we want to get done, it's not their goals. It's not, they may not give a shit about that for us. And maybe they shouldn't, right? Maybe, I mean, their goal is to get this fucking software up or whatever.
Yeah. And so but you still got to figure out a way to
Bridge.
push them towards their goals, right? You still
Right.
got to, but
Yeah.
it's going to be it's going to be different than yours.
Yeah, for sure. And so I think, I think the takeaway from that is sometimes we've got to put self to the side and really it goes back to empathy and just try to put yourself in their shoes. And the great thing is if you can do that before you fire off at them, you're going to be in better shape. Now, that doesn't always mean that's going to happen. So we all say things that we shouldn't. We all make sarcastic remarks or raise our voice or whatever, fill in the blank. But sometimes it is easier just to not have to go in and make that amends, if you will, which is part of the program that anyhow. Yeah, I
One
get
thing that's kind of interesting is, and it kind of goes back to how you talked about to be conscious of your strengths and be conscious of your weaknesses. So now that I'm conscious of this and I'm working on it, I was also like, okay, so what's an immediate solution? Because it's going to take some time for me to work on this. And so what I did was I removed myself from communication.
with
So
that.
I'm not communicating daily with really anyone in the company anymore that's not a manager or executive, which honestly I probably shouldn't have been having to do that anyways, but this situation just kind of made me realize that. So I've just taken myself out of that communication and given that responsibility to somebody else on my team so that while I'm working on this, I just have some space.
How easy is it for you to delegate stuff like that?
Not easy.
Right, I bet. Not easy at all.
No, I like to control things. I tend to think that if I don't do it, then it's not going to get done as good.
Yeah. And I think that's a fine example of people that are in recovery or maybe people that are not. Like we try to control, I try to control everything around me. And it is something I have to work on daily. And a lot of times the book Power of Now was just such a powerful thing for me because it really put in perspective. I can't control anything that I can't touch right this very moment. I can't control what happens 10 minutes from now. Sure as hell can't control what happened 10 minutes ago. And if I sit and try, I can't be here with you. And so it takes you out of like experiencing the things that you're supposed to experience.
Yep. It's actually a really interesting concept and thought when you start thinking about that. Everything happens right now.
That's right.
Anything that's going to happen in the future is going to happen in the now, in that moment in the future. Anything that happened in the past, it happened in the moment.
Right.
Right now is all we really ever have.
That's it.
Right now. When I read that book when I was locked up,
Yeah.
and it was a game changer, dude, because I was not happy to be there. I wanted to be out. I was upset that there was a lot of things that I was just upset about. And so reading that book in there really helped calm me down and helped me just focus on getting through that moment and not so focused on what I had just done or what I was going to do when I get out, but just like really focused on then and there and taking control of that moment.
Talk about being in a place for somebody that likes to control things. Being in a place like jail or wherever, it is suffocating because you have zero control over anything.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a
Oh, yeah.
tough time. How long did you, what did you were in jail or prison or what?
16 months
Okay.
was the longest, just jail. So 9 months in one and then got transferred to another one for 6 months.
Tough time right there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
it's a long
15
time.
months, I guess that is.
Yeah, it's a long time.
Yep.
Did you use when you got out?
Yep.
Of course. Yeah, of course. Of course. Because one would think you spend that much time in jail, you'd learn a lesson. But as you mentioned earlier, consequences don't always determine a shift in change. And really, when I stopped drinking, so I stopped drinking in 2009 and I had gotten the blow stick in my car and I had blown into it and set it off. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a detector basically that you have to blow in to start your car. It's a pain in the ass, but I was able to legally drive. So I'd set it off. I had to go down to the DMV because it immediately reports to the DMV and you have 48 hours to get down there and explain yourself. So I explained myself to the lady. Of course, I lied. And for whatever reason, she let me go. And she said, if I see you in here again, you'll never drive on the streets of North Carolina. And that was the time, that was the day that I made a decision. I can't do this anymore. Like I've burnt up my last 9 lives or whatever.
How long ago was that?
2009.
So in between you going to like rehab and getting out and drinking a week later in 2009, like you basically just drank that whole time.
2005, I got busted with 4 ounces of cocaine.
Okay.
So one would have thought I would have stopped then, but I didn't. I had a great attorney. I went to a rehab for 6 months. I did not go to jail. I mean, I did go to jail, but I didn't spend a bunch of time in jail.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I really can't really get into all the reasons for that,
Yeah,
but
that's crazy, dude. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it is what it is. I got out of that rehab. I drank the night I got out of the rehab. It was a 6 month Pentecostal holiness, like not a medication rehab, but like a work camp. It was a nightmare, but it wasn't prison. So 2009 is when I stopped drinking. And I didn't use drugs after that time. Haven't used not any hard drugs. And so I got sober in 2009 after that experience with the DMV. And I was in recovery, working program, getting everything back in life that I thought that the promises teach you. I started a business. And in about 20, let's see, 2015, 2015-ish, I started smoking weed. And so I didn't,
You went from 2009 to 2015 and didn't drink
didn't drink, didn't
and
do
didn't
anything.
smoke. Okay. That's a long time. 6
Yep.
years. Okay.
And so I started smoking weed on, not a lot, but a little bit. And what that did is it slowly pulled me away from going, like I slowly pulled me away from the program. And I started listening to Tony Robbins around that time. And I heard him explain that you say, I am, whatever comes after that is going to be true. So I thought, and this, I use this as an excuse.
Want to hear a cool quote from my mentor
Here,
about that? What follows I am follows you.
right. Makes complete sense. So I thought,
Follows I am follows you.
right. So I said, what? I can't keep going to this place and saying I am an alcoholic because that means I'm broken. That means that I'm going to, I just associated it with not the person that I wanted to be, which really, to be honest, was just an excuse for me to not go back. And so I didn't go back. And I continued to smoke weed. And every year, things got slowly worse. So slow that I didn't recognize how bad they were getting until they were completely out of control. And when I say out of control, my marriage was falling apart. I'd lost that business. I had taken control back over my life, opposed to depending on God or anybody else. And I was running things and doing a piss poor job at it. And
What do you
so
think? What do you think it was that kind of got you into that mindset and living life like that? Because a lot of people would say it's just weed, right?
ego,
Which, okay,
ego,
ego.
pure ego. I can do this. I don't need the program. I've got this. I don't need God. I don't need anything. I can do this. And my ego took over and I could not figure out what the problem was. I went and tried to do ayahuasca twice. I mean, I was searching for anything to solve the problem of me outside of going back to the program that I knew had given me the life that I wanted, right? But what didn't even enter my mind because I had convinced myself 100% that I didn't need to go back there. I believed my own story. And some things happened. So I went down to RoofCon. This was in 20, let's see, we're in 2024 today. So this was in 20, I've been sober almost 2 years. So let's say it was 2021, I guess, November of 2021. And Jeff Boab introduced me to a guy named Eric Obrandt, who has been sober and in the program for a while. And in talking with him, I said, I just don't, I'm just not going to go back to the program because I just feel like I don't really need it. And he said, maybe it's really not about you, Corey. In fact, it is not about you, but you've made it about you. I didn't know, I've known this guy for like 20 minutes. He was like, you need to go and give back what was fucking freely given to you. And it hit me like a lightning bolt. And when I got back, I started going back to AA. I was still smoking weed. And I had a conversation with God. And I said, I know that this is not going to completely work if I keep smoking weed, but I'm willing to quit. I'm just not willing to quit right now. And so I was leaving. Things weren't getting a lot better, really. And something happened that brought me to my knees. I got a call from a lady that said she had claimed that he was watching pornography with her. I almost lost my mind. Like I called every judge that I know, every cop that I know, private investigator. They all said there's something not right with this, but I couldn't figure this out. And I almost lost my mind because I just couldn't understand how this CPS was called,
So no one ever admitted any of it?
nothing. And so that's what brought me to my knees. And I was losing my mind because I could not get any traction on this. I couldn't figure it out. And so so shortly after that, I was leaving a meeting and I'd hit my weed pen and I almost ran a red light going 70 miles an hour. And about 2 minutes later, I almost ran another red light going 70 miles an hour. And I knew at that moment that was it. That was the time. I'd already been warned twice. I know what this looks like. I don't need the third warning. And so I threw the weed pen out, and that was March 25th, 2 years ago. This 2 years will be March 26th will be I'll be completely sober 2 full years. And just in my life since then has gone from not knowing what I was going to do for work, not knowing if the marriage was going to hold up, not knowing how we were going to make our bills, to all of those problems are totally solved now. And I don't worry about any of those things. And I'm no longer in the marriage. And I'm in a relationship where I'm extremely happy and in a job that I love. And I believe that it's all because I surrendered and asked for help.
That's awesome, man. That's huge. Congrats, bro. Do you, so when you hit that weed pin for the last time, you saw those two red lights, but do you really think that that's what it was that made you finally surrender? Or do you think that it was a feeling that you had inside? Do you think that it was an internal thing where you just got to the point where you were like, dude, I can't fucking live like this anymore? Because
Yeah.
that's what it was for me. For me, it got to the point where it was either I got sick of feeling like I wanted to die inside. I didn't want to feel like that anymore. So for me, it was all right. It's time to either give up or fucking change, surrender. And luckily, I'm not the type of person to give up. So at that moment, I decided to change, and I haven't looked back. But it was, I don't know. I'm just asking that because I'm always trying to figure out what it is that makes someone finally get to that point.
I think I was to the point where I was ready. I was ready to surrender. I needed those two instances to scare me enough because it wasn't like I was high. I just left the meeting. So it wasn't like I was intoxicated. And that's why I almost ran the red. Like, I can't tell you why I almost ran those lights. It makes no sense. And that
Yeah.
tells me if there's something that doesn't make sense to me, but is telling it, but I see this as a sign, I better listen because if I don't listen, I don't know what may happen next. Because what happens if if I do run the next red light and I T-bone and kill somebody? And that's what I think about, or kill
Yeah.
myself for that matter.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you that. So when you say sign, you've talked a few times, you've said God. Is for you, is that what it was? Was it a sign from God?
Yeah, it was.
So do you think that some of the reason that it had such a weight, carried such a weight for you is because there was a spiritual connection to it?
Yeah, I think internally some I mean for sure something internally spoke to my soul that said this is we made a deal. And the deal was you weren't ready to quit then, but now you got to fulfill your part of it.
Yeah, I think the reason I'm asking that is I think spirituality, whatever you believe in, is super important when surrendering. And I know that it has been for me. I think I may have some different beliefs than you do in regards to my spirituality. I believe in the universe and vibration and frequency and energy. But one way or the other, whatever you believe in, I think it's important to believe that there is something out there greater than yourself.
And that's it. Yeah, we're on the exact same page. You can call it whatever you want. Do I think there's a man in the sky hanging out? No, not necessarily. I don't really know what it is. But what I do know is you said it, vibration, sound, just that internal, there's an internal clock or an internal something that guides us that's outside of me. And I've proven this. Like, I know for a fact how my life goes when I tap into that power.
Yep.
And I know how my life goes when I don't tap into that power. Yeah, dude. And control's a great way to look at it. When I'm trying to control something that's out of my control, I am not depending on anybody else but Corey.
Yep.
And that don't work.
Nope.
No.
But it's not, it takes work, right? It takes work to really be conscious of all of the different things that you're trying to control in life that really you don't have any control over.
And the truth of the matter is, if you hand that over to the universe or a higher power, whatever it is you want to call it, you're going to get through it easier. Like,
Yep.
it's really just like a life hack, if that's how you want to look at it. At least that's been my experience.
Yep. Me too. Me too. So what advice would you give to somebody, whether they're struggling with substance abuse right now or whether they're depressed or just struggling internally and not really getting much out of life and kind of struggling and wonder, like, what is the fucking point of this? Do you have
Yeah.
any recommendations that you would give to somebody like that from what you've been through?
Yeah. The hardest thing that I had to do to get to this point is to ask somebody for help. And it takes a lot as a man, it takes a lot to admit you don't have all the answers. It takes a lot to admit that you haven't got it figured out. It takes a lot to admit that you need somebody else's help. But something happens, and it may not happen the first time, but there's something that happens when you genuinely ask someone for help. If it's the right person, you can't just ask anybody for help and expect them to help you. But I think asking for help's been that was one of the biggest challenges that I had. But once I asked for help, people were willing to help. But
Yep.
again, you got to be careful where you're asking for help because it's not always going to be sound information. You know what I mean? And and I think people want to help. People want to help you, but they can't help you if they don't know you need it.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of key points there. That's really good, a really good suggestion, by the way. But I think for you, it took two things. Number one, the hard part is you have to admit to yourself that you need help. That's hard for people to do. I think whether you're a man or a woman, it's sometimes hard to take a look at ourselves and admit that we need help. And then the second step is to go ask somebody. That's hard too. And I do think you're right. I do I think it's hard for men and women, but I think there's a little bit more ego attached to men in asking for help because we're supposed to have shit figured out and be the leaders. The other thing that wanted to mention there is I agree. I think that for the most part, I think people want to help. Vulnerability is what you were talking about there a little bit. Like, so again, I'm going to go back to the universe, but I talked about how gratitude is one of the highest vibrating frequencies of the universe, meaning like the more grateful you are, the more that stuff's going to come back to you. An opposite of that would be like shame. Shame is the lowest vibrating frequency in the universe. Shame is no good. Like feeling shitty about yourself and things that you've done, it's fucked up because the problem is when we feel shitty about stuff, it makes us do the exact stuff that we're trying to stop
Yeah.
because we want to continue to numb it.
Yeah.
Authenticity is the highest vibrating frequency in the universe. They put over 400 people in I don't know what it was, some kind of machine, and it could measure emotion. And they put people through different scenarios that would bring up different emotions. And authenticity vibrated 400 times stronger than love, which is the second highest vibrating emotion. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think that in order to go ask somebody for help, it's a super vulnerable thing to do. But I think vulnerability is directly tied to authenticity. And so I think if you can find the right person to be vulnerable with and you're authentic about the fact that, hey, I need some help, I think that creates for like a super powerful opportunity for change and opportunity for somebody to help you out. And I don't know, that's just kind of where my mind was going while you were talking about that.
Well, I think intention, right? If you have the right intention when you're asking for help, not the intention of, let me see what I can get. Let me see if I can get this guy to help me do this
Yeah,
thing so I can get to where I need to go. That's not
it's
what we're
genuine.
talking.
It's
It's
genuine. It's authentic.
right. Yeah.
Yep.
And you got to be careful about intentions because you can get sidelined with the wrong intentions. But if you keep the other person's intentions at the forefront, it pays back in dividends. The universe will pay you back in dividends as long as you're not expecting it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This has been awesome, man. It's
Yeah,
been
man.
cool to learn more about your story, and I'll come onto your podcast here soon once we've released the one here, but I'd love to be back onto your podcast. But yeah, it's been super cool to learn more about your story. I'm proud of you. I know firsthand that it is not easy and it's weird. It's when you've been an addict or an alcoholic and you see somebody else doing the damn thing, it's impossible to not have respect for that person, whether you like him or not.
Yeah.
I got sober with some dumbass people, dude, that I like don't really care to be friends with all the time, but it will never take away my respect for what they're doing because I know that it takes work, dude, and I have the utmost respect for you and what you've been able to do.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you spending the time today to just to allow me the space to talk. That's really cool.
Yeah, man. Been awesome.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you. I'll let you know when it comes out.
All right, sounds good, brother.
Thank you, brother.
Okay.